Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this weird-looking guy right here. This is the Null Knives Voodoo. That's right, we want to talk about that voodoo that, well, Null Knives does. Anyways, first off, though, in the name of full disclosure, I got to thank Null Knives for loaning this guy my way. This is a review sample prototype loaner sort of thing. It's heading to Metal Complex next. But he reached out to me, said, "Hey, Nick, I'm making another model. You interested?" And after the first showing, the rating, I was absolutely interested. Told him, though, I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, the ugly. It might be a gem, it might be junk. He did still send it along. Nonetheless, we do have to assume this is the very best quality controlled one of these prototypes ever, and I'm doing my absolute best not to let that affect the nature or the quality of my review. And actually, on the matter of this being a prototype, one thing that is worth noting is that it came with a list of changes that are going to be going on. Among those changes, there's apparently going to be a little bit more cut out underneath the clip here. There is going to be a chamfer here at the base of the clip, which, again, I fully support. There will be a slightly shorter detent ramp, which I don't actually think is that impactful, but okay, whatever. The logo is going to apparently be about 25% smaller, which, yep, good call. And then the top of the harpoon, they're going to do a little bit more filleting on the top there to smooth this out. Not a bad idea, but those are the only revisions that are expected relative to the production, and that's why I was willing to take this guy on and do a review, despite this being a prototype. So, there you go. Next thing, let's do some size comparison. First up, this is not a small knife. We'll put it up here against the Ontario Rat number 2, and up against the Spyderco Delica. And what we're going to see here is, yeah, this is not small. Right, we put this guy up next to the Delica. We see the Delica has markedly less blade length to it. A closer comparison would actually be the Spyderco PM2, here wearing a fancy set of scales. What we're going to see is, size-wise, these are very, very similar, although the PM2 has slightly less sharpened blade length than this guy. So this is a pretty big knife. This is a full-size knife by any measure. So there is that. And then I'll also go ahead and measure it up real quick, and it's a little tricky to measure exactly because you do have the thumb stud there, but this guy is coming in any way I choose to measure it over 3.5 inches, which means if that is the local law you land, well, this is going to be a felony, so do keep that in mind. And then finally, on the just so everybody knows right up front, this is a $355 knife, and it is being made by Null Knives. Null Knives is a designer based out of New York. However, all of the knives are being made overseas in China by an OEM that we'll talk a little bit about later. So, anyways, there you go. Let's jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this very interesting knife. On the good side, to start with, there are a couple of different varieties of this knife out there available. There is a natural micarta version with a normal non-black handle here for $345, or you can get blue micarta for $355. This model here is black micarta with a black frame, in case you can't tell by the black micarta and the black frame, for $355, and there is a fat carbon version of it available for $395. I don't know what color the fat carbon's going to be. Either way, it's going to look like a countertop or something, but either way, it's a whole situation. Sorry, I'm not a big fat carbon person. But nonetheless, those are your options there, going anywhere from $345 up to $395 if you want the fat carbon on there. So, there is that. So I do like, though, that there are different varieties available for it. I think that's always a nice thing because, well, this particular one, for instance, isn't really my style, but maybe the natural micarta one would appeal to me a little bit more. Who knows? But anyways, next thing, the ergonomics on this guy are absolutely fine. They work. They're good to go. Can grip over here, and in that case, really the only little hot spot is this little corner right here. Everything is fine there, but if you choke back up, oh, then that goes away, and this really works well in the hand because you not only are getting the little bit of jimping right here, which is nice, getting that little extra thickness here toward the back, because a lot of folks like a little extra thickness in the back there, and you're also getting the top of this little thumb stud guy is actually there and supporting your thumb, which makes it a little bit more comfortable. This grip. Ergonomically, I kind of looked at this and thought this was going to be, gripping a fistful of used needles, but instead this works out. Oh God, that's a real image. Don't take that one. That's bad. Biohazards are important, kids. Don't mess with them. But anyways, that's an ugly kind of thing. But the ergonomics on this are weirdly not ugly. In fact, they are fine. So I don't have to repeat that more. Next thing, the handle inlays on this guy. You see here that there is a black micarta inlay, and although the black kind of disappears into the black over here, what we see here is the inlay extends all the way way out to here. And what this means is that as you are gripping the knife, at least with my relatively small hands, as I'm gripping this guy to open it using the thumb studs to flick it, all that I am going to be touching is the inlay. And what this means is there is no additional pressure on the lock bar, which means the detent is very consistent. You can always get exactly the amount of detent you want, and that's a beautiful thing, right? I really do appreciate that. It works very well at keeping the detent consistent relative to ones where you are putting your fingers directly onto the lock bar, for instance, like something like this, although this is a bad example because the clip is well positioned. Anyways, but still, there you have variable detent. This is the HEA Designs Chief, just happened to be on my table. So there is that. Next thing, this guy has micarta that is actually pretty good, right? The black micarta is always a little harder to judge, but this has that nice kind of in the middle feeling where it's not too fabricy, but it's not too resiny. It's just, this is solid micarta, right? This is a good black micarta. No complaint there. Next thing, there are some nice little details in here in the design. The lines and whatnot are very nice. You get this extra bit here. This little bit in the back here, I don't entirely understand what it is, but I do kind of like it. It's a little bit snaky, reptilian of some variety. The whole thing's kind of got a reptile vibe to it, which is good. And if there's a warranty claim, I guess that's a reptile dysfunction. Anyways, moving along. And we also see little details like, for instance, there is a cutout in the backspace of there, which makes sure that you've got some extra space for the blade to go into, just in case there's any issue with stop pins and whatnot, which I appreciate. It's just overall, it's pretty damn well done. The design on it is attractive in that way, so that's good. Next thing, the clip on this guy is right above the micarta here, but it's good in that it has an angle to it, right? The clip angle at the very top is something like this. And what that means is that as you are carrying this guy in your pocket, it is going to naturally want to sit like this, which means that especially if you're carrying it in your right pocket, which most people would, this is going to naturally hide itself away so that you can reach past the knife into your pocket rather than the ones that are hanging vertically where you might be doing a little bit more of this and shoving it out of the way. That's just, it's a good clip position. That's a nice little detail and it's well thought through. Speaking of lines, look at the lines in the clip here. This is very clearly a custom-made clip for this knife, which is a nice thing. Next thing, the thumb stud on this guy is weird, right? This is a unique thumb stud. We see here it is kind of a triangular thing with some actual, a little hard to see, I'll zoom in a bit. You can see there's actual, it's kind of got some ziggurat thing going on here with the stepping and that, but none of that on the top there, so that's cool. But this is actually a cool looking thumb stud. And one of the things that's interesting about it is that it is pretty much out of the slicing path. I don't say it's not entirely so because there is a universe in which you're doing a cut kind of like this where it would be, but then it's just not that much farther away from the handle. So as a result, this really doesn't particularly affect cutting power, even though it is a relatively large thumb stud on there. And it works well too. I think the angles have been done well, at least for my hands, to make it a very natural and very easy and very comfortable knife to flick open with that thumb stud there. It's good. And you can also, by the way, do the other side. It is ambidextrous. So even with my relatively unambidextrous hands, I can pop this guy open using the thumb stud, using my finger on the other side there, along with using the groove there to pop it open that way. So it's a good little thumb stud. I got to say, it's bizarre, but it works well. And I think it also kind of complements the overall design of the thing. So that's cool. Next thing, blade on this guy. This is a modified Warncliffe, maybe? Or a weird sheep's foot? Not 100% sure. It's not flat, right? I got to be clear about that, right? If I put this up against a straight edge, what we see here is, yeah, it's pretty decidedly not flat. But at the same time, it feels spiritually like a Warncliffe, and it's got this reverse tanto thing going on in the back there. And it has a very high hollow grind to it. It's a very deep hollow, too. And as a result, it comes down to a relatively thin edge. Actually, to a pretty damn thin edge. I got to respect that a lot. It also has this harpoon at the very top of it, this little additional part. And it's M390, which is a steel that one really just can't argue with. Right here, M390, although, boy, that font's a little obnoxious. Here, I'll zoom in a little bit to give you the obnoxicity. What is this M? What is that thing doing there? I'm sorry, but no. Anyways, I digress. We're not doing font criticism. We're doing knife criticism. So, anyways, it's a nice blade, and it works very well for daily cutting. No argument there. Next thing, this has a very nice action. It is very, very smooth, especially once I got in there and did a disassembly. It is super smooth. You can thumb stud open it from either side very nicely. The detent is dialed in well for that. You can also use the groove in the blade to open this guy, again, from either side. You can even thumb it out slowly if you wanted to using that groove. It is super smooth, and it is very, very drop-shotty, right? This is, oh, he says, going the opposite direction because I'm bad at drop-shotting, apparently. right now. Oh, it's been a day. But anyways, it is super smooth. It's a little drop shotty, and frankly, it's so drop shotty that you kind of have to be careful, right? This is one of those that I'm often open on its or close on its side. That way, it doesn't come at me there because there's no flipper tab to stop this guy from coming down. If you kind of put your thumb right here, it'll stop itself naturally. But this is a very, very drop shot knife. And that can be a pro or a con, right? I have to admit, as much as I like a drop shotty knife, for many people it's not a great idea, and there were some safety questions. So this is a very drop shotty knife, and especially without that flipper tab, do keep that in mind. It requires a little respect there. So to me, all of that is the good, is that it's got a really nice action, very smooth, nice blade, thumb stud that is both unique and out of the slicing path, good, well-designed clip, nice micarta. The inlays keep your hands off the lock bar. It's got fine ergos, even though it looks like it shouldn't have good ergos, and it's got a couple of different varieties. The great side to me, look, the great thing about this is the design. That's the thing that makes this jump out. There's just not a whole lot out there that's looking just like this, right? This is its own little beast. It's got it's like a really unique set of lines that are mirrored in a couple of different places. It's got cool, that like this kind of super thin hollow ground harpoon. That's not a common thing. It's just a weird-looking knife. And I say that with respect and with appreciation. The whole thing is very, very unusual, and as a result, it kind of looks like nothing I've seen before. I mean, yeah, sure, it looks like a knife, but at the same time, this feels relatively unique. Yes, I said relatively unique. Commenters, feel free to start telling me how unique is an absolute noun. Anyways, or adjective. I digress. But the thing that makes this stand out is that uniqueness, and that's the thing that you need to buy this knife for above anything else. If you're not loving the unique design, then you're not going to love this knife, but if you do, oh boy, this is going to jump out at you. So to me, that's what's great, is this design. It is 100% out there and a little bit unique. The bad side, it is a little bit aggro looking too. I'm going to be honest with you here. This is not a knife that is, well, the lunchroom acceptance factor of this is remarkably low, right? So this is, you take this out in the lunchroom, and especially the all-black version here, Edna is diving under the table and calling HR. That's going to be a thing for some folks. If it isn't a thing in your life, then you should be happy. You have a privilege. Anyways, moving on. This guy is also over 3.5 inches for absolutely no reason. The amount of extra cutting that you can do with that little tiny bit of blade tip is very small. The amount of felony it could be is very large. So it always strikes me that makers should go just under those lines rather than just over them. Next thing, the edge of the harpoon, as they all mentioned they will be doing, this needs rounded a little bit more. This is a little bit too sharp. It's like not cut you open sharp, but it's not an ideal thing, so I'm glad they're going to be fixing on that guy. The groove in this guy, generally speaking, is going to collect some crud, right? There are parts of this groove that are actually never particularly exposed, so there's going to be pocket lint and such that builds up in here. If you cut into something, if you're cutting into cheese, you're going to get cheese in the groove here, and you'll need to get in there with like a Q-tip or something to clean it out of there. And it's not the end of the world, right? You can do it, but it's just a little bit of a pain. And especially with a very good thumb stud action that would have allowed you to flick from either side. I'm not necessarily sure I needed the groove, but you can call it a design touch more than anything. Next thing. The price on this guy is pretty high, $355. I did a double take on the price. As is always the case when I try to write my reviews, I do my absolute best to not know the price until it's time to write the review, so that way I can formulate what I think this is going to come out for. And I figured this would be coming in at or below where the Raiden is, his prior one, and this is $60 more than the Raiden at $355. Thing is, like, it's well made. It's pretty well done. There's a lot of good here, but $355 buys a lot of overseas made frame lock these days, right? So this is a knife that is just pricey. That was almost, I'd say, the biggest disappointment with the knife itself. That's just a lot of price, and so you're really going to have to be head over heels in love with the design to go there. Next thing, this is also a pre-order based knife, and to be fair, this is not something that's necessarily a bad thing, and in some ways this is much nicer than doing in little drops, right, where everybody tries and then they crash the website and then they complain and the maker looks bad, right? In some ways, pre-orders have some nicety, but there is a leap of faith involved. And I feel like it is my duty to point out, not because I mistrust Null Knives. I have no reason to believe he's going to be anything but excellent about this, but I think it's my duty to point out that pre-orders are a risk, right? There is a leap of faith. I pre-ordered the first one, the Raiden, and progress seems to be coming along despite the unnamed manufacturer having major shipping delays and whatnot, but nonetheless, especially when you have a small maker doing pre-order runs, you should always think about that risk, and you should probably never make a pre-order that you can't afford to lose that money outright. The maker is also very much, if you look at the website, very against refunds, which I get from his perspective, right? Because the money is tied up, the knife is being made, they are ordered, there were minimum quantities and whatnot, so it's not like that money can come back easily. But it's also, I gotta be real, it reads as a little bit of a red flag there. Again, I have no reason not to mistrust him, but the pre-order only and then, oh my God, no refunds no matter what, is like, So like I said, I did a pre-order for the prior one, so hopefully it'll work out, but you do have to remember that. Anytime you're dealing with pre-order knives, especially from smaller makers, especially with factories they don't control, there's always a level of risk there. So I kind of feel like I got to point that out. So to me, all that is the bad, is that there is the risk of pre-ordering. It is very expensive. The groove is going to collect crud. The edges of the harpoon need rounded. It is over 3.5 inches, and for no damn good reason. And it is pretty aggro looking. On the ugly front, unfortunately, and this isn't about the knife at all, or frankly about Null, this is, when you ask, well, who made this? Well, we are told it is a Chinese company, and the maker cannot reveal the OEM under contractual terms. This means that the OEM has said to them, no, you are not allowed to tell people who is making this knife. And this is ugly and dumb, because transparency is in the best interest of consumers, right? If you look at this and you know, oh, this is made by We Knives or Rayot or Bestech or any other company, then you can make assumptions. You can learn things about how the product is going to be. You can learn about that, right? That is in our best interest. And we do know it's Chinese made, so there's no, question about like, oh, where's it actually being made? And I do have a great deal of suspicion as to who made this guy. There's only one company that actually does these contracts, generally speaking. And generally, companies do this kind of thing. Not, of course, in this case. I have no idea what's going on in this particular case. But companies often do this kind of thing to disguise that they are able to make just as high-quality knives at much lower price points than they're well known for. So basically, they're shielding their brand from doing things cheaper, right? But considering that this is just as expensive as any other damn knife from this maker, it makes even less sense. So I really do hope that as Null Knives grows, he's able to tell the OEM to cut the cloak and dagger bullshit and just explain who's making the products. Because this current approach of, you can't tell anybody who made it, is tedious, it's anti-consumer. They're not fooling anybody, and the company that makes them just ends up looking shadier. And yes, company, we know who you are. Drop the freaking pretense. So anyways, to me, that's what's ugly, is that it's really stupid when OEMs try and hide who they are from eventual consumers, because it just makes everybody involved look worse. So, final conclusion here. This is a fine knife if you like that design a lot, right? Because it's got some good material choices, fine ergos, good inlays that make the detent more consistent, some nice micarta, a nice clip, a solid, albeit weird, thumb stud, a nice blade, a super nice action. It is pretty aggro looking. It's longer than it kind of needed to be, and it crosses a legal line in the process. The edges of the harpoon need a little rounding, which they're going to do. The groove is going to collect some gunk. It's pretty pricey. It's pre-order only, and the OEM is not nearly hot enough to be this crazy. But the biggest mitigating factor for me in this review, honestly, was the price. I came into this review, I sat down to write and was thinking, oh boy, this is going to be great. And then I looked at the price, and it kind of was a kick in the gut. I had this mentally in the $250 to $300 range, right? There's a lot of good stuff here, but it feels to me like an extra $55 snuck in there somewhere. It doesn't make the knife itself less good, but it does make the competition much better. And generally speaking, I see pre-orders as sort of requiring an early adopter value, right? If you're going to pre-order something, you need to make it a really nice value, because I'm taking a risk and I should get rewarded for that with really nice value, and I just don't see it here. And considering then that many of the competitors are available for direct purchase without pre-orders and with more transparent sourcing in terms of factory, unfortunately those things knock this guy off the gem list. In terms of pure fit and finish and function, it could very easily be there, especially with this design. But when you add in the price and the pre-order, ultimately this just gets a little harder to recommend. So my final conclusion here is that this is a nice knife, if and only if you are in love with that look. The knife isn't practically any better than its competitors at this price point, but this is about the design. If you love this design, you will love this knife. If you don't care, then this isn't going to do really anything for you at all. It's going to be a fine functional tool, but you can get much, frankly, you can get better for cheaper without this design. And so personally, I'm kind of in that zone where I look at the design and think, yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a little different, but it's not my flavor of cool. So so I'm going to pass on this one, particularly at this price. But if this design is speaking to you, and you don't mind that price, then you're going to get a really nice action, a solid cutting tool, a weird, pretty badass design. And so, as a result, I'd say you should voodoo it. Anyways, there you go. Hope this has been interesting to you and that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.